You ever move into a new neighborhood thinking it's gonna be your dream home? Big backyard, good schools, sunshine all year round? Yeah, that was us. My wife, Jenna, and I had just moved into a beautiful gated community in Scottsdale, Arizona. Everything looked like a postcard: palm trees, red tile roofs, and overly friendly realtors promising a peaceful suburban life. But peaceful? Nah. Because it only took 3 days before we had our first run-in with HOA Karen. Now let me tell you about Jenna. She's a former Navy officer, a decorated federal agent, and let's be real, she's the kind of woman who could break down a door or bake you cookies, depending on what you need. Always calm, always collected. She's legally allowed to carry a firearm as part of her off-duty privileges, and she knows how to handle it better than anyone I've ever met. On our third morning in Scottsdale, Jenna decided to go on her usual 6 a.m. jog. Tank top, leggings, ponytail, and yes, her sidearm holstered on her hip. She's not trying to show off, it's protocol, and she carries for safety. Especially since she's still involved in field work. I was sipping my coffee when it started. I heard the knock, no, more like pounding, on our door. I opened it, and there she was, early 50s, bob haircut, visor, clipboard. The HOA queen herself. Karen. She can't wear a weapon around here, she shrieked, pointing toward the road where Jenna was jogging past. I blinked. Excuse me? Karen narrowed her eyes like she'd rehearsed this moment. This is a family community. We don't want people brandishing guns on the street. I already called the police. I laughed a little, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't. Not even a little bit. She stood there proudly like she'd just won a prize for Best Neighborhood Snitch, arms crossed, waiting for the squad car to show up. I stepped outside and said, "Ma'am, my wife is a federal agent. She's legally carrying that weapon."
Karen scoffed. "I don't care if she's Wonder Woman. The rules say no firearms in public view. This is my community, and I won't have gun-toting maniacs scaring the children." Before I could argue, we heard the sirens. 2 squad cars rolled up like a scene from a crime show. Officers stepped out quickly, hands near their belts, eyes sharp. Jenna had just turned the corner and was jogging back toward the house, earbuds in, still unaware of the drama waiting for her. Karen pointed again. "There. That's her. Arrest her." What happened next caught everyone off guard. One of the officers glanced at Jenna, looked at her holster, then locked eyes with her. His expression shifted. Recognition. He stepped forward, nodding respectfully. "Agent Mitchell?" Jenna finally realized what was happening. She pulled out one earbud, confused but calm. "Morning, officer. Everything all right?" The other cop snapped into action too. "Ma'am, sorry about this. We received a call from a concerned resident. Just needed to confirm identity." And then, this is the part Karen didn't expect, they both saluted her. Karen's face? Priceless. The officers apologized again, reassured Jenna she was fully within her rights, and told Karen to refrain from making frivolous calls to emergency services. Karen just stood there. Silent. Steaming. And plotting. Because this wasn't the end of it. Oh no. This was just the beginning. What would you do if your neighbor called the cops on your spouse for legally carrying a weapon? Drop your thoughts below, and remember, things are about to get messy. The moment the squad cars pulled away, Karen didn't even glance at me. She turned with her clipboard clutched tight to her chest and stormed off like she'd just lost a court case. Jenna jogged up, wiping sweat from her brow, and smirked. "So that was our neighborhood welcome party?" I nodded. "Welcome to Scottsdale." But here's the thing about Karen, she's not the kind to back down after being publicly embarrassed. Especially not by a woman in better shape, with a stronger resume, and actual law enforcement credentials. Nope. That kind of humiliation? It ferments in people like her. And the next morning, we saw what that looked like. At exactly 6:01 a.m., a letter was taped to our door. HOA letterhead. All caps. Typed in bold red font like it came from the president himself. It read, "Dear resident, your spouse has violated our community's public display of weapons rule. Such display creates fear and discomfort among residents. This is an official warning. Continued violation may result in fines and possible legal action through the HOA board." Jenna raised an eyebrow as she read it. Interesting. So now they're trying to scare me with policy. I could see the gears turning in her head. Jenna doesn't get angry like normal people. She gets strategic. We spent the next few days lying low. Jenna didn't jog with her firearm, not because she was intimidated, but because she was gathering information. Quietly. Calmly. She attended the next HOA meeting, as a silent observer. Karen was there, of course. At the front of the room, sitting like the queen of the castle, barking about landscaping violations and mailbox paint colors. You'd think she was running a military operation. But when the meeting ended, Jenna approached her with a calm smile. Karen, I appreciate your concerns. I'd like to see the official bylaw about firearm visibility. Karen blinked. What? The one you referenced in the warning letter. I've looked through the HOA guidelines, there's nothing that overrides Arizona's open carry laws. Karen's face turned red like she'd swallowed a chili pepper. I don't need to explain myself to you. That's fine, Jenna said coolly. I'll just bring it up at the next HOA compliance hearing. See if we can clear things up. And right then, I saw fear flicker in Karen's eyes. Because Jenna had done something no one else in the neighborhood ever dared to do, challenge the queen bee in her own hive. And Karen? She wasn't about to let that go unanswered. The next week was like a slow-motion war. We started getting ridiculous complaints from the HOA. Your trash bins were visible for 7 extra minutes after pickup. Your porch light is too bright. Your grass is a 1/4 inch taller than regulation. Karen wasn't just mad. She was mobilizing the entire HOA to target us. One petty complaint at a time. But Jenna? She didn't flinch. She printed out the Arizona revised statutes, highlighted the relevant open carry laws, and made copies for every house on the block. She even added a note at the bottom. If you're ever harassed for exercising your legal rights, I'm happy to help. Suddenly, Karen's influence started to crack. A couple of neighbors knocked on our door that weekend. One guy, a former Marine, said, didn't realize she was messing with a Fed. You need backup, I got your 6. That's when it shifted. Karen realized this wasn't just about Jenna's gun anymore. It was about power, hers slipping away, and Jenna's rising. But Karen wasn't done yet. Because a week later, she went too far. Way too far. And this time, she didn't just mess with Jenna. She came after our daughter. What would you do if someone started targeting your family out of pure spite? Let me know below. Jenna and I had handled a lot over the years. We weren't new to pressure or pettiness. Between her federal work and my background in private security, we'd faced real danger, real threats. But what Karen did next? That crossed a line no neighbor, no matter how entitled or power-drunk, should ever cross. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Scottsdale's sun was blazing like usual, and our 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was walking home from her school's aftercare program, only a few blocks away. Same route every day. Safe neighborhood. Security cameras everywhere. Nothing had ever gone wrong before. But that day, when she came through the door, her little face was red, not from the heat, but from holding back tears. Daddy, she said, dropping her backpack, the mean lady yelled at me. My stomach dropped. What lady? She hesitated. The one with the short hair and the paper book. She told me I wasn't allowed to walk on the sidewalk, 'cause my mommy's a bad guy with a gun. I froze. Karen. I looked at Jenna. She had been in the kitchen, slicing apples for Lily. The knife stopped midair. Her face didn't change, but her entire posture shifted, rigid, alert, deadly calm. She what? Jenna asked, voice flat. She was standing in front of her garden, Lily sniffled. She said kids whose mommies carry guns shouldn't live here. That it's not safe. She said mommy scares people and maybe the police should take me somewhere safer. I felt like something had punched me in the chest. You don't talk to someone's child. You don't poison an 8-year-old's heart with your bitterness. And you definitely don't threaten to involve law enforcement as a scare tactic against a child. Jenna didn't raise her voice. She simply put the knife down, wiped her hands with a towel, and walked out the front door. I followed. We didn't say anything to each other as we walked the short path to Karen's house. It was only 4 doors down. The front yard was, of course, immaculate. Perfectly trimmed bushes, flags of every seasonal holiday, a HOA proud member sign on the porch. I knocked on the door hard, twice. Karen opened it with that smug half-smile she wore like war paint. But it vanished the moment she saw Jenna standing beside me. Before she could say a word, Jenna stepped forward. You ever speak to my daughter again, I swear to God, you'll regret it. Karen straightened up. Excuse me? You heard me. She's 8. You don't get to involve children in your pathetic little vendetta. Karen scoffed. Maybe you shouldn't be raising her in a home with visible weapons. You think this is about me? Other parents are worried. I have a responsibility to this neighborhood. No, Jenna said coldly. You have a fantasy of control. But I've got something you don't, actual authority. You think I'm just some housewife jogging around with a gun? I've been in situations you couldn't handle for 5 seconds. I've taken down cartel members, domestic traffickers, violent offenders. And you? You run a spreadsheet about lawn gnomes and garbage bins. I could see Karen trying to form a retort. But she couldn't. Because Jenna had leaned in close, dropped her voice low, and added, if you ever approach my daughter again, or say her name, or look at her the wrong way, I'll take legal action so fast, your clipboard will catch fire. Then Jenna turned and walked away. Karen stood frozen in the doorway, visibly shaken. She wasn't expecting confrontation like that, not face to face. She was used to people tiptoeing around her rules, writing polite emails, or backing down under pressure. Not us. That night, I installed an extra set of motion detectors, updated our home surveillance system, and contacted a lawyer just in case Karen decided to escalate further. Jenna? She filed an official harassment report with the Scottsdale Police Department and attached a written statement from Lily, as well as our Ring camera footage from the sidewalk. But the most surprising part came 2 days later. A man knocked on our door. Mid-40s, slight southern accent, wore a blue blazer and khakis. He introduced himself as Todd Ramsey, the president of the HOA board. I heard about what happened, he said, visibly uncomfortable. Karen didn't exactly go through proper channels. The board is reviewing her behavior. This isn't the kind of situation we want to escalate, especially not involving children. Jenna crossed her arms. So you're going to do something about her? Todd hesitated. Karen has a lot of influence. Been here since the subdivision was built. But what she did, crossed the line. He looked at Jenna seriously. You have more support in this community than you think. Most of us respect law enforcement. And honestly, we're glad someone like you lives here. We feel safer. He gave us his card and said the board would be discussing Karen's status at the next closed-door meeting. He also said, off the record, that several neighbors had complained about her behavior for years but no one had ever stood up to her before. That night, Jenna and I sat on the back patio, sipping iced tea. She's not done, I said. Jenna shook her head. Not even close. People like her? They don't surrender. They escalate. And she was right. Because the very next morning, someone slashed the tires on Jenna's government-issued SUV. And that wasn't just petty HOA revenge anymore. That was a crime. I can still hear Jenna's voice from that morning. Calm, controlled, too calm. She stood in our driveway in her robe, cup of coffee in one hand, the other hand hovering near her hip, old instincts kicking in. Her eyes were locked on the SUV. 2 front tires, completely shredded. Not a slow leak, not a nail from the road. This was surgical. Intentional. I came out seconds later, barefoot, still half asleep, and my stomach dropped when I saw it. Someone really went for it, I muttered. Jenna didn't respond. She just stared, breathing slowly. Calculating. I reached for my phone to call the police, but she stopped me. No, she said. Let me handle it. I recognized that tone. That wasn't my wife talking, it was the agent in her. Jenna had gone from citizen to investigator in a blink. The slashed tires weren't just vandalism. To her, it was an escalation, a message. And she wasn't going to answer it with panic. She was going to collect evidence. She stepped back into the garage, came out with gloves and a flashlight. While most people would have been calling their insurance company, Jenna was already kneeling by the tire, checking cut angles, rubber shavings, footprints, and proximity to our security cams. She found what she was looking for within minutes, a clean boot print in the soft dirt near the side of the driveway. Jenna stood up. That's not a Karen move. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? She's too careful. Too image-obsessed. She likes to control people, not get her hands dirty. This wasn't about fear. It was about sending a warning. She was right. And that's when something else clicked into place. Karen was gathering supporters. Over the past week, we'd noticed strange behavior from some of the neighbors. The Johnsons, who used to wave every morning, now pulled their blinds down when we passed. The guy with the giant "back the blue" bumper sticker had suddenly stopped talking to Jenna altogether. One lady even yanked her kids off the sidewalk when Lily rode her bike by. Karen was stirring the pot, painting us as a threat, twisting the narrative. And now someone had taken that narrative too far. We still filed a police report. Jenna's SUV was federal property. That automatically kicked the case to a different level. But the officers who arrived were almost too relaxed. They took photos, nodded along, but didn't seem especially eager to dig deep. That evening, Jenna reached out to one of her old friends, an active-duty FBI field agent named Tamara Vance. Within hours, Tamara arranged for a quiet forensic crew to stop by, under the radar. No local police, no HOA involvement. Just professionals. And what they found confirmed our fears. The slashes were done with a military-grade utility knife, the kind not sold over the counter. The angle of the cuts suggested someone who had experience with tactical strikes, clean, deliberate, practiced. This wasn't vandalism by a bored teenager. It was someone trained. Jenna stayed quiet most of the evening, poring over documents, video footage, and neighbor profiles. She pulled up HOA rosters, looked into backgrounds, scanned public records. And then she froze. "His name is Ben Marston," she said. "Lives 2 streets down. Retired Army. Dishonorable discharge. Assault and weapons misconduct in his record. Guess who sponsored his HOA fine dismissal last year?" "Karen," I said. Jenna nodded. Things were getting ugly, and fast. But Jenna wasn't going to wait for another attack. She was ready to make a move. The next morning, she went to the HOA board meeting, uninvited. She wasn't there to sit and observe this time. She came in a navy blue blazer, badge on her hip, evidence folder in hand. Karen's face turned pale the moment Jenna walked in. "I need 10 minutes, Jenna told the room. "That's all." Todd Ramsey, the HOA president, nodded nervously. "Go ahead, Agent Mitchell." What followed was like watching a courtroom drama. Jenna laid out the letter Karen sent, warning us illegally. The harassment toward Lily. The slashed tires. A boot print match to Ben Marston's previous criminal record. And most importantly, her belief that Karen had manipulated others into targeting us, possibly inciting a former military man with a violent history. Karen exploded. "This is a witch hunt. You think you can walk in here and slander me? I've lived here for 18 years. You people just moved in." Jenna didn't even flinch. "Exactly," she said. "We've been here less than a month. And in that time, you've already involved law enforcement under false pretenses, threatened a child, and now there's physical sabotage involved. The problem isn't the gun on my hip, Karen. The problem is the rot in your heart." Silence. The entire room was still. Todd finally spoke. "We'll need to open a formal investigation into this. Effective immediately, Karen is suspended from any HOA decision-making activity until further notice." Karen stormed out, screaming about lawyers and slander and lawsuits. But for the first time, she didn't have the power in the room. Jenna did. But we both knew this wasn't over. Because people like Karen don't quit. They burn. And the fire hadn't even started yet. We thought Karen's suspension would cool things down. It didn't. For about 4 days, things were quiet. Too quiet. No HOA warnings, no sideways glances, no barking dogs the moment we stepped outside. It felt like the entire neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see what Jenna would do next. But on the 5th morning, something new appeared on our doorstep. An unmarked envelope. No return address. Slipped neatly under the front door. Jenna picked it up carefully, scanned it like it might contain anthrax, then opened it with a letter opener. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in all caps, no signature. "You think badges make you untouchable? This neighborhood was fine before you came. Leave before something happens to your little girl." My heart slammed into my ribs. Jenna just stared at the paper. No emotion. Just pure calculation in her eyes. "This isn't Karen," she said after a moment. "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. "Karen's a narcissist. She needs her name tied to her actions. If she sent this, she'd have added HOA letterhead and a passive-aggressive signature." "So who then?" Jenna didn't answer. She went straight to her office, pulled out a UV light and a fingerprint kit. The paper was clean, no prints, no smudges. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. And they knew how to scare people. But they didn't know Jenna. Instead of fear, she doubled down. She installed additional motion sensor cameras covering every angle of the house. Had Lily escorted to and from school by a trusted retired agent she'd once worked with. And then she contacted Tamara from the FBI again. "We're dealing with someone who's not just emotional now," Jenna said into the phone. "This is organized. Calculated. The kind of escalation that leads to violence." Tamara agreed. She said she'd forward the threat to the Federal Task Force Unit and they'd begin quiet monitoring of the area. Unmarked vehicles. Background checks. Communication sweeps. Suburban war tactics. But Karen wasn't staying quiet either. Despite being suspended, she began hosting community gatherings in her backyard. Invite only. Lights strung up. Folding chairs arranged in rows. And they weren't BBQs or pool parties. They were strategy meetings. One of our sympathetic neighbors, Mrs. Campbell, an older widow who'd seen right through Karen from the beginning, passed along what she heard. "They're calling it a neighborhood watch rebuild. But really, they're spreading lies about Jenna. Saying she's under investigation. saying she abused her badge. One man even suggested calling CPS to do a welfare check on Lily. That was the final straw. Mess with me? Fine. Mess with my wife? You'll lose. But mess with my daughter? You just made it personal. Jenna called in a favor. Not from law enforcement. From the press. An old college friend of hers was now a mid-level journalist for a local news outlet in Phoenix. Jenna sent her the full story. The harassment. The fake HOA violations. The cops being weaponized. The saluted badge. And now, the anonymous threat against a child. And 2 days later, there it was on the evening news. Federal agent harassed by HOA extremist in Scottsdale suburb. They blurred our address and faces, but they didn't blur the story. And they didn't blur Karen's name. That night, Karen's backyard meeting was interrupted by several angry neighbors shouting, "You told us it was about rules, and you put a kid in danger?" Karen was no longer a queen with a clipboard. She was radioactive. The next morning, our doorbell rang. It was Todd Ramsey again, HOA president, looking worse than before, pale, exhausted, and carrying a folder. "I'm not supposed to do this," he said, "but I need you to see what's happening behind the scenes." He handed Jenna the folder. Inside were printed emails, texts, and message board screenshots from within the HOA's internal communication system. Secret meetings. Plots to vote Todd out. Talk of removing problematic families through legal loopholes. And the worst part? Karen wasn't alone. There were 6 others. HOA board members, longtime residents, all with some connection to Karen. A clique. A faction. They were treating the HOA like a mini-government, and Jenna was now their greatest threat. "This has gone too far," Todd said. "We either stop this now, or someone's going to get hurt." Jenna nodded slowly. "Then we go public. Full transparency." And that's when her plan began. The next few days were a blur of strategy. Jenna set up a private neighborhood website where residents could post anonymously about HOA abuse. She made sure it was secure, encrypted, impossible to trace. And the stories started pouring in. Unjust fines. Intimidation. Property damage. Threats. Years of bullying and manipulation, all tied back to Karen's inner circle. We were no longer alone. We had a community. But just when it looked like the tide was turning, something happened that changed everything. That Friday night, our Ring camera caught a figure walking up our driveway in a hoodie. They didn't ring the bell. They just left a box. Inside the box? A printed photo of Lily playing in the front yard, with a red X marked over her face. And under it, a single bullet. Jenna looked at me, eyes burning. "This isn't an HOA fight anymore," she whispered. "This is war." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Jenna. We sat in the living room, lights dimmed, Lily asleep upstairs, that bullet sitting in a Ziploc bag on the coffee table. I kept staring at the red X over our daughter's face in the photo, and something inside me broke. Not fear. Not rage. Something deeper. Something primal. Because now, it wasn't about Karen. It wasn't about the HOA. It wasn't even about Jenna's badge anymore. This was about protecting our daughter from whoever thought they could break us. Jenna had already snapped into federal mode. She had the living room transformed into a mini command center. Laptop open, phone pinging with encrypted texts, footage pulled from all 6 of our outdoor cameras, plus video from Mrs. Campbell's unit across the street. I watched her work. Focused. Silent. Precise. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't shaken. She was calculating, and that's when I knew. Somebody was about to regret everything. Tamara, her FBI contact, arrived at 3:47 a.m. No lights. Unmarked car. Just a knock and a whisper, "Let's talk." She examined the photo and the bullet, then turned to Jenna. "This is no longer a neighborhood problem. This is a federal threat." Jenna nodded. "Then let's treat it like one." By sunrise, surveillance vans were in position, hidden. Microdrones flew above our cul-de-sac. Phones were being monitored under a quiet warrant. And Jenna, she was watching it all unfold from a laptop while sipping black coffee. Lily was still asleep. We kept her in bed, kept her unaware, kept her safe. But every minute that passed, we were growing more convinced, someone in the neighborhood wasn't just angry, they were dangerous. Tamara laid it out clearly, the precision of this threat? The lack of fingerprints? The use of a single round, non-fatal, symbolic, it's someone trained. Tactical. Military or law enforcement background. Ben Marston? I offered. Jenna shook her head. Too sloppy. Too proud. This is someone quieter. Then Jenna opened the HOA roster again. Cross-referenced names. Checked backgrounds. She paused on one. James DeWitt. Resident. 3 houses east. Never attended HOA meetings. Always paid dues early. Never complained. Never voted. Retired ATF. Internal Affairs. Discharged under investigation 6 years ago. And guess who sponsored his move into the neighborhood? Karen. We had our suspect. That night, Jenna went for a walk. No badge. No firearm. Just leggings, a hoodie, and a jogging tracker. She passed DeWitt's house casually. Lights on. Garage slightly open. Someone moving inside. She passed twice. First time, nothing. Second time, his front camera turned off. That was it. Tamara and her team moved in that night, quiet, no sirens. They didn't arrest him immediately. They just monitored. Recorded. Observed. And what they saw? DeWitt, late at night, slipping out the back fence, walking half a block to a parked car, opening the trunk, and pulling out a second box. Same brand as the one we'd received. Camera caught the serial number. FBI traced it within hours. It was purchased with cash, by Karen. Tamara dropped the file on our table the next morning. They're working together. She's feeding him. He's acting on it. Jenna exhaled slowly. Then we need to end this. Now. Jenna didn't go to the police. She went higher. She scheduled a private meeting with the Scottsdale city attorney, bringing with her video evidence of DeWitt's movements, recordings of Karen's previous threats, the bullet, the red X photo, statements from other neighbors who'd also been harassed, and the HOA emails Todd Ramsey had secretly handed over. The city attorney took one look at the folder and said, "I'll bring this straight to the district prosecutor." That same afternoon, warrants were issued. By 6 p.m., DeWitt was arrested in his home. No resistance. No questions. By 7:30 p.m., Karen was served. Not arrested. Not yet. But she was placed under official civil investigation for conspiracy, targeted harassment, and misuse of HOA authority. And her face? Plastered across local news stations by 10 p.m. The community turned overnight. The woman who once ruled with clipped lawns and empty threats? Now she couldn't walk her dog without being filmed by 3 different neighbors. But just when we thought it was over, Jenna received an untraceable text. "You think this ends with Karen? You've made enemies. Watch your back, agent." She read it once, deleted it, and whispered, "Looks like we were hunting the wrong queen." Because Karen? She wasn't the top of the chain. She was just a pawn. And the real threat? Was still out there. The week after the incident, our peaceful home in Scottsdale, Arizona, became ground zero for an unexpected storm. Flyers started popping up in everyone's mailboxes. The HOA was calling for an emergency board meeting. The bold letters read, "Agenda, concerning behavior by resident officer at our address." They didn't even bother to use my wife's name, just her title and our home address, like she was a threat to the neighborhood. My blood boiled. Karen had weaponized the HOA. And we knew this wasn't just about a gun, this was about control, intimidation, and bruised ego. The night of the meeting, the community clubhouse was packed. You'd think it was a presidential debate. Some people were there to defend us. Others had clearly been stirred up by Karen's fearmongering, whispering about gun safety and family values. I sat beside my wife, holding her hand tightly. She wore civilian clothes, but her calm authority filled the room. Karen strutted in like a peacock, lips pursed, clutching a thick manila folder as if it contained classified evidence. Her 2 closest allies, Margot and Dale, followed like loyal lapdogs. The HOA president, Mr. Lutz, began the meeting. "We're here to discuss concerns raised by a resident about visible firearms and potential violations of HOA community standards." Karen interrupted, standing up before being recognized. "I have the floor," she declared, and turned toward the crowd. "I called the police because I saw a weapon. I didn't know she was law enforcement. But even so, this is a neighborhood, not a training ground. Our children shouldn't see guns in the street." Murmurs spread across the room. My wife stood up. Calm. Controlled. Powerful. "Would you rather your children grow up unaware of the people who protect them? Do you hide police from them when they're hurt? Or do you just want to hide me because I make you uncomfortable?" The room went silent. She stepped forward slowly and placed her badge gently on the table in front of the HOA board. I wasn't violating any laws. I wasn't threatening anyone. I was returning from duty. If you want to rewrite the bylaws, fine. But don't twist this into something it's not. Don't pretend this is about safety when it's clearly about bias. Karen flushed red but held her ground. "I represent this community." "No," someone from the crowd interrupted. A middle-aged man in a sports cap stood up. "You represent yourself. And your problem isn't with a gun. It's with a woman who outranks you in courage." Several people nodded. Others clapped softly. Karen opened her manila folder, desperate to regain control, and held up a printed image, a blurry screenshot from our doorbell camera, showing my wife getting out of the car. She was carrying, openly. Mr. Lutz interrupted this time. That's not a violation of Arizona law. And not an HOA bylaw either, Karen. Karen sputtered. So we're just going to allow weapons in plain view now? No, my wife said firmly. We're going to allow service members to come home with dignity. That's what we're going to allow. I looked around the room and saw the tide turning. The same neighbors who'd looked uncertain earlier were now staring at Karen with skepticism. The HOA board called for a vote. Should further action be taken against us? Result, 7-2. In our favor. Karen lost. Publicly. And she hated that more than anything. But she didn't back down. As the meeting adjourned, she walked past us and hissed, "This isn't over." And the way she said it? It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The next morning, the sun hit our living room windows like a spotlight, making the polished metal on the mantel gleam like it was alive. My wife, Captain Elena Martinez, retired Navy SEAL turned federal agent, stood in the kitchen, still in her robe, sipping coffee, while I read emails on my laptop. It felt like the storm had passed. But peace is a fragile thing in a neighborhood patrolled by HOA Karen. At 9:12 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Karen standing with two other HOA board members, Richard, a retired dentist with a superiority complex, and Tina, who always seemed more interested in gossip than governance. Karen crossed her arms like she was leading a military tribunal. "We're here to formally serve you a notice of violation," she announced. "Brandishing a weapon on HOA property, threatening residents, and disrespecting the community code." My wife stepped beside me. She was calm, in athletic wear, hair tied back, but her eyes had the steady fire of someone who'd been through real wars. "Elena," Karen said smugly, "you may have fooled those cops, but the HOA isn't impressed with your Halloween costume." Richard snickered. "It's not even legal to impersonate an officer." Tina piped up, "I googled you, and nothing came up. You're not in the police database. Maybe this was all just a big lie." I felt a surge of anger, but Elena laid a hand on my arm. "Let's go inside," she said to the group. "You want to talk about records? Fine. Let's talk." They hesitated, but curiosity won. Once seated in our living room, Elena disappeared for a moment. When she returned, she placed a thick black binder on the table and opened it to the first page. Photos. Dozens of them. Her in combat fatigues, medals pinned to her chest. Her shaking hands with 2 U.S. presidents. Her leading teams through the jungles of Colombia, deserts of Syria, and rooftops in undisclosed regions. Then came the documents, clearance levels, commendations from Homeland Security, letters from grieving families thanking her for bringing home soldiers who didn't make it. Karen's face turned pale. Richard leaned forward, silent. Tina stopped breathing. Elena looked them in the eye. "You didn't find anything online because most of my work was classified. But I'll show you what I can. Because what you did yesterday wasn't just ignorant, it was dangerous." Karen whispered, "We just thought." "You thought wrong," Elena snapped. "You escalated something you didn't understand. I was off-duty, concealed carrying, as allowed by federal law and Florida state law. You called the police on me, a decorated agent who has taken bullets for this country, because your HOA rulebook gave you a false sense of authority." Tina stammered, "We didn't mean to insult you." Elena stood tall. "You didn't insult me. You insulted the uniform, the service, and every woman who's ever put her life on the line to be taken seriously." Then she walked to the mantel, took down the medal, and placed it gently on the table in front of Karen. "You ever seen a silver star up close, Karen? You earned this by dragging your teammate out of an ambush zone while under fire. Not by writing citations about garbage bins and lawn lengths." Silence. The kind that slams into your chest. Karen slowly stood. I think we've made a mistake." Elena nodded. "Yes. And you're not the only one who will learn from it." The sun was just setting over Scottsdale, Arizona, casting a soft golden hue across the HOA community's neatly manicured lawns and pristine sidewalks. The place looked peaceful, deceptively so. Behind the scenes, tension brewed like a storm ready to break. And tonight, the storm had a name, Karen. We were summoned to a special HOA meeting, mandatory attendance. The email read, "To discuss community safety violations involving recent firearm incidents." No names were mentioned, but everyone knew it was about my wife, Emily. Emily, a federal agent with over a decade of service and multiple commendations, wasn't fazed. She slipped into her formal suit, pinned on her badge, and secured her concealed carry holster. If they wanted to talk about firearm violations, they'd have to address the law herself. As we entered the HOA clubhouse, you could cut the tension with a knife. Karen sat at the center of the board, smug and confident, flanked by her usual posse, nosy neighbors who took pride in filing noise complaints over kids playing basketball. Karen cleared her throat. Let's begin. We have a very serious matter. A resident was seen wearing a firearm in public spaces. That's a threat to our children and our peace. The murmurs around the room grew louder. Emily stood up. If I may, she said calmly, her voice resonating with quiet authority. Karen tried to interrupt. This is not open to discussion. Emily pulled out her badge slowly, placing it on the table for everyone to see. I am a federal law enforcement officer. I am authorized, trained, and required by law to carry, even off-duty. The firearm was holstered, secured, and fully compliant with state and federal law. You, Karen, called the police on me without cause. You wasted emergency resources, and worse, you tried to publicly shame an officer doing her duty. Silence fell. Karen blinked, trying to recover. I didn't know. You weren't in uniform. You looked suspicious. And what does suspicious mean to you, exactly? Emily asked. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. Another board member, Mr. Hensley, finally spoke. She's right. If her actions are legal and she's trained, this isn't a violation. This meeting is out of line. But she's scaring people. Karen blurted out. Do we want guns in our parks? Emily nodded. Then let's talk about real safety. Because if someone dangerous ever entered this neighborhood, you'll be thankful someone like me lives next door. Then Emily turned to everyone. I don't carry to intimidate anyone. I carry because it's my job. I carry because I swore an oath to protect this country, including this very neighborhood. For the first time since this whole mess started, heads began nodding. Even the same cop Karen had called weeks earlier was there, this time, as an invited guest. He stood up and said, she's right. I was one of the responding officers that day. When I saw her badge, we knew immediately, this was not a criminal. This was an ally. Karen sat back, speechless, as the board voted. No violations. No further action. Case closed. But just as we thought the chaos was over, one of Karen's allies stood and whispered something to her. Karen smiled slightly. You may have won this round, she muttered. But I've got friends in higher places. Emily caught every word. And just like that, we knew, this wasn't over yet. The next morning, peace had returned to our gated California community, but it was a silence that buzzed with unspoken tension. After the viral video of the cops saluting my wife, Deputy Cassandra Cole of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. HOA Karen, whose real name turned out to be Judith Wexler, was notably absent. Rumors were already circulating, she was facing an internal HOA investigation, possibly legal consequences. But that wasn't the ending we were after. Not yet. Cassandra and I sat on our front porch sipping coffee when a black SUV pulled into the driveway. It was Officer Ramirez, the same officer who'd initially responded and saluted Cassandra in front of everyone. He stepped out and walked up the path with a serious look on his face. We thought you might want to see this, he said, handing Cassandra an envelope marked confidential. Inside was a full internal report detailing every HOA call to law enforcement in the last year, and Judith's name showed up 63 times. She's been harassing residents, especially minorities and veterans, Ramirez said. We're building a case. But the department wanted to give you the option to file a personal civil harassment complaint as well. Cassandra looked at me. What do you think? I leaned back. I think she's not just a nuisance, she's dangerous. And it's time someone stood up to her properly. The next day, we did just that. Cassandra filed a formal complaint at the sheriff's office and a civil restraining order at the local courthouse. Ramirez informed us that the HOA board had finally voted, Judith was being removed from the HOA leadership team, and a public apology would be issued to my wife and all the residents she had harassed over the years. That night, there was a neighborhood gathering. For the first time in months, people laughed without fear. Kids played freely in the cul-de-sac. Cassandra was approached by families thanking her, not just for being a deputy, but for being a neighbor who stood up for what was right. And then something amazing happened. An elderly veteran, Mr. Callahan, who lived 3 doors down and barely spoke to anyone, stood up with his cane and raised a glass. To Deputy Cole, he said, voice cracking with emotion, for reminding us that true authority comes with humility, not a clipboard. Cheers echoed across the lawn. As the sun dipped behind the palm trees, Cassandra squeezed my hand. You know, I wore the badge for 12 years. I thought I knew what it meant. But this meant something more. And that's how the nightmare of HOA Karen ended. Not with yelling. Not even with handcuffs. But with truth, dignity, and a community reclaiming its soul. Sometimes, the best way to deal with a tyrant is to stand taller than their clipboard ever could. The end.